Alright guys, so our objective today is for you to be able to demonstrate how to properly condition flowers. So we've been doing some work the last couple of days. We went through that note set of conditioning flowers, and then we had the handout that you guys went through and turned in the other day. And so today is you actually doing this. So we want to review a bit of it. I'm going to go through the process. We've talked about it, but I actually want to show it to you. So before we actually start touching the flowers, let's take a look at our materials that we're going to use today. So the first thing we have is our floral bucket. Remember we talked about these, all right? We can use traditional floral buckets, or we can use the shipping containers that we get the flowers in. Either one is acceptable. The other piece of equipment we're going to need is some sort of clippers. These are just a generic clipper that we're going to use today, all right, to be able to cut the stems. We also have our disinfectant or our sanitation solution, all right. What do we want to make sure is sanitized before we start?
The buckets.
Is there anything else besides the bucket that we want to sanitize? No? All right. Remember, you also want to sanitize your clippers because they could have diseases or bacteria on them. So why are we worried about this sanitation process before we start using the equipment with our flowers?
So that the flowers don't die.
Yeah, we don't want them to die, right? Or we want to increase what?
Vase life.
Yeah, their vase life or their shelf life. Very good. So if we can get dirt and disease away from them, this should help to increase their shelf life. All right, so the first thing we're going to do when we're conditioning, remember, is we're going to take our bucket. We want to put about 2 ounces of our disinfectant in, and I've already measured that out and done that. All right, so we're going to use a hot water solution to be able to disinfect our buckets, right? We want to make sure it's hot, not lukewarm. So it's hot. So remember, after we get the solution in there and the water, we always want to scrub them, even if we can't see physical dirt, right? It's the things we can't see that we're worried about. So once we scrub it, we use the floral brush, not just some grody sponge in the sink. We get it all rinsed out. And then we are good to go. So after our bucket is rinsed, it's clean, it's sanitized, what do we need to put into the bucket before we put flowers in it? Anybody remember from our notes? What do we put in after it's clean? We're gonna put water in it. What are we gonna put in the water? Nobody? All right, so from your notes, remember, we're gonna put some sort of floral food in it. All right, so for our purposes, we're gonna take our scoop and we're gonna put about 1/8 of a scoop in. You always wanna read your instructions to tell you how much to use, because you're just wasting money if you use too much. So once we put that in there, we're gonna put water into our bucket. Again, we want cold water. We're gonna fill it about 2 to 3 inches in our bucket. All right, now we're ready to actually cut our flowers. So the first thing we're gonna do, we get our flowers out, we wanna visually inspect them. So these don't look that great, right? They're at the end of the season. We just pick them out of the garden. But normally you'd wanna inspect them. You wanna remove any leaves that you're not going to use in your design. You never want the leaves in the water. Why don't we want the leaves to touch the water? Anybody? Yeah, Katie, this is exactly right. We don't want the leaves to touch the water because that's how we're gonna breed disease, right? They're gonna start to rot. So after we've got our leaves, they're not gonna touch the water. Does anybody remember how we want to cut the flowers?
On an angle.
Yeah, that's right. We wanna cut them on an angle, so not straight across. Why do we wanna cut them on an angle? Does anybody remember? I think they have an idea.
To absorb the water.
Yeah, to absorb the water, right? Remember, if it's flat and it sits against it, we're gonna create that air pocket. But when we cut it on an angle, that air pocket's not gonna form. And then we go ahead and we put them in our water. So we're simply gonna do that for each of our flowers. We're gonna inspect them for quality, cut them on an angle, and put them into our bucket. And remember, we can cut as many as we want at a time. We just don't want to damage the stems. Put them all in there. Once our bucket's full, what are we going to do with our bucket after it's been filled? We've got our water, we've got our floral food, we've got our flowers in it. What's next?
Put it in the cooler.
Yeah, we're going to put it in the cooler. Does anybody remember what our cooler temperature should be at for cut flowers? Yeah, John. Yeah, you're exactly right. 34 degrees, that's exactly right. Between 33 and 35. So after we get them conditioned, then we're gonna go and put them in the cooler. And remember, every time you enter the cooler, you always want to check to make sure the temperature is about where it should be. So what questions do we have? All right, if there's no questions, at each of your lab stations, there's a bunch of flowers, there's a bucket, the solution and the floral food are here, so get with your lab partners, all right? And you guys can go ahead, open up your bunches, inspect them, and then you can go ahead and you can condition your flowers. So if you forget these steps, remember they're in the handout that's in your notes. They're also listed on the board. And then at the end, we're gonna talk about if there were any problems that you encountered. Questions, comments, concerns, things for the good of the order? All right, you guys can go ahead and you can start conditioning your flowers.